Chapter 4, Part 4. Finally come to the end of Chapter 4 here, and we are going to be talking about a chief from Hihifo named Firimoyatu. So Firimoyatu's family was allowed by his chief garrison, the chief of his garrison in Hihifo. He's from Hihifo, Tonga, was allowed to go and join Finau because they're related. It doesn't say how, it just says that they're related. Firimoyatu goes and enters into the service of the king, Finau Ulukalala. This kind of helped Finau cool down from being so upset that Dakai took over Nuwalofa altogether and burned it down and all that. So this is a good little break from that to draw his attention away from it. At this time, English ships more frequently touched down in Tongatapu more than any of the other islands. The English have always stopped by Tongatapu and made trades with the Tongans, and they'd come and basically get to know the people for a day, and just like tourists would come, tour around for a day, and leave. They were able to accrue some ink and a pen. They didn't know what it was for, but they were offered, here's some ink and pen. Let me trade for those coconuts or whatever. Anyway, they have ink and pen there. They also gave them some gunpowder. What they used it for, I have no idea, but they had gunpowder in Tonga in the early 1800s. They happened to have a letter. There was a letter written in English given to the chief of Maufanga. We talked about Maufanga earlier, where Finau Ulukalala's dad was from. Tuitui hears about a letter that was written, and Tuitui was the Hawaiian interpreter, and he assumes that, or he thinks that it's a letter telling the English what they did to the Port-au-Prince, and told Finau, hey, they've written a letter telling somebody in England about what we did at the Port-au-Prince. We might want to get that letter so that it doesn't get back and then they send the armies over here. This letter is in Maufanga, so Finau sends for the letter, was able to obtain it from Maufanga and brought back to where they are in Paimut. Finau looks at it and makes some observations looking at the letter, and then he hands it over to Jeremiah Higgins, standing there, and ordered Jeremiah Higgins to tell what the letter said, what it meant. Mariner wasn't here at the time. It was just these guys and Jeremiah Higgins, so that's why Finau asked Jeremiah Higgins here, read this, what does it say, what does it mean? Jeremiah Higgins starts to read it and starts translating it in Tongan, and basically says to any English captain that comes from anywhere to let him know that William Mariner is being held captive by the Tongans and the chiefs there. And it said that they were being treated well. The letter said they were being treated kindly, but would really love to return back to their country. Now, this wasn't what the letter really said, but this is what he translated just to soften the blow. Which, in turn, Finau responded, oh, well, that's understandable, that these poor guys want to go back to their family and friends. Yeah, that's understandable. What the letter really said was not to go to Hapai. Do not go to Hapai. Go to Tonga. That's where everybody are nice. Don't go to Hapai. Those guys are not nice guys. And advising them at the same time, don't allow too many of the natives to board the ship, because they knew what happened the last time they let too many guys on the ship. It also said to go in and take some of the chiefs as prisoners until Mariner and his friends are released back into the care of the ship of the captain of the Palangi, of the Englishman. Which means this is probably a letter written by Mariner himself telling them, hey, don't go to Hapai, go to Tonga if you want to go anywhere and vacation or go tour. But before you leave, take some of these chiefs as prisoners so that we can go. We're stuck here, we're prisoners. But he obviously didn't tell them that. He told them, oh, we're treated nicely here, but we want to go home. So, understandable. Finau was puzzled. How did you get all of that information from what this is? He said, there's marks on here, but they aren't in picture form to give the information that you would like to get. After a while, he sent for Mariner, told him to come here, and told Mariner, write something down. So they have this pen, they have this ink, and now they're going to write something down. Which means Mariner wrote that letter in Maufanga while they were still there. Somebody found it and brought it back, and now they're Finau was making him read it. Now Finau wants to see how this communication is done. So Mariner says, all right, what do you want me to write down? Finau says, write my name down. Mariner writes down Feenou, which is how he spelt it, how it sounded, Finau. So then Finau calls for another Englishman, one of the other Balangis, to come over there. He comes over there and he tells Mariner, turn your back. And he tells this Balang guy, read that, and gave him the paper. The Balang guy picked up the paper, looked at it, and he said, Finau. Finau snatched the paper from his hand. Finau looks at the paper, examines it, flips the paper over again, looks at it. In amazement, basically, he was shocked. Finau asks him, this doesn't look like me or anybody else. How could you have known that this is me? Where's my legs? Where's my head? Where's my body? So then they sat there. Finau, having had Mariner write something, turned his back, giving it to this guy who had his back turned, and giving him a piece of paper and reading it back and forth. They're reading and they're writing whatever Finau says for 3 or 4 hours. They do this. He's writing down different places, different names of persons, things, and just writing back and forth. And everybody's sitting around now watching as this goes on. Everybody amazed, everybody, probably laughing and enjoying themselves. It's almost like magic they're watching. And they start taking turns. Remember, there were 15 Balangis when they got to Nuku'alofa to war and battle. So there's 15 Balangis there somewhere among them. And he's making these Balangis switch places and switch writings, who's writing what and who's reading what, to make sure that they're not being tricked about the writing and that it is consistently the same and it's right. So if you're from Pangay Motu, you may have had the first reading and writing lesson in Tonga. This was 1804, 1805. They're reading and they're writing, well, to each other. So they weren't teaching and instructing it, but they were actually watching them read and write down words. They had a letter read. For 3 or 4 hours they do this to the entertainment of the people. Now, whoever's on Pangay Motu is now near in that circle, in that group, watching this happen, watching these 15 Palangi guys go back and forth and switching, writing down with their backs turned, and Finau just telling them what to write and read, and they read it off. So this is probably had to have been an entertaining time to at least get them getting Finau distracted from what's happening in Nuku'alofa when Takai burned Nuku'alofa down. Finau even wrote something down. He told one of the Palangi guys to write down a love anecdote, and the other guy read it off. And the other guy read it off, and all the crowd just started laughing and giggling at whatever it was that Finau had said. All in good humor, all in good fun. Now he's starting to enjoy this form of communication. And he was pretty much astonished at the fact that none of them were confused about it. You couldn't get it confused. So if it was a drawing or something like that, you may or may not guess who the person is, but to his astonishment that they weren't confused about what was being written down, it was immediate. Write down the words and pronounce the words. Finau was amazed by that. He thought it was very mysterious, and it was beyond any of the Tongans' understanding how to read and write. Finau, as we've learned earlier, had already formed an opinion about reading and writing long ago. We've talked about that before, how he thought it was witchcraft, and how at least those in Hapai, thought that this was witchcraft, so they didn't allow it. But now it kind of opened up to him that, this may be a good thing. Finau said that it was very possible for them to learn the same types of marks or markings that was understood by both parties, so that they can share it as something they can communicate with. So he's starting to understand how beneficial reading and writing could be. And Mr. Mariner told him, I can write down anything somebody else has never seen, and they will come and they will recognize and read it exactly as it is. Finau whispered to Mariner, write down Tuku'aho. Remember, Tuku'aho was the guy in Tonga that Tuponiwa went and killed with Finau, and all their warriors from Hapai Vava'u went and killed. Finau then tells him, write down Takai. Remember, Takai is the guy that just burned down Nuku'alofa with his warriors from Pea, the ones that burned Nuku'alofa down. Mariner writes down Takai. Finau then tries to trick him and asks him, Is he blind? Finau's obviously trying to trick to see if that does that. That if writing or reading and writing can tell you descriptions of a person that you've never seen before. Mariner tells him, no, I only wrote down the description of what that word, that guy, sounds like. I have no idea what the guy looks like or how he behaves or anything like that. We're only talking about sounds to communicate. Then he tells Mariner to write down, that guy is blind in his left eye. Everybody was freaking blown away because Mariner didn't know that guy was blind in his left eye. But everybody who knows that guy's blind in his left eye, which means they probably all knew that guy, was astonished now. Because there's no way Mariner could have known that. There's no way the guy who was reading it could have known that because he's never seen him either. Mariner writes it down, he reads it, and then they're all astonished because he's never seen that guy. How could he have known? But we all understand what reading and writing is, so we get it. But they were freaking blown away. Mariner goes on to tell them, gives them, a lesson on how you can send a letter from one side of the world to the other. And the person who's carrying the letter can know nothing of the letter and take it and communicate or take that communication to the other side of the world, and somebody can read it and know exactly what's going on the other side with nothing more than just writing it down. He told them that history and posterity and family, everything was written down and recorded. Finau expressed that this is a very noble invention. Brilliant, as a matter of fact. But he said this probably wouldn't do for the Tonga Islands. Like, it wouldn't work for us. Because our communication has to be said and has to be heard, and somebody knows. Somebody will always know. If we take reading and writing, then I won't be sure if I'll live tomorrow. Because if conspiracies are passed out through private and secret notes, I can't know. There's no way I can know. I can't have a spy or know whether or not I'm going to be killed or assassinated, or nobody's going to know. There'd be too many things going on through these ways of communications, too many secrets, which is something that the Tongans back then didn't truly have, right? Because if you pass a message down to somebody, now somebody else knows. And if that person knows, anybody else can know and find out. And it's easier to find out what's going on. But Finau also said that he would like to know it so that he can teach the women how to read it, right? Or send messages that way to women and have affairs. This is what came to his mind after that. I want to know it so I can have affairs with the women and their husbands don't know about it. That's the personality of Finau Ulukalala, y'all. All he wanted to do was avoid the vengeance of the husbands of the women he wanted to have affairs with. I mean, he ain't wrong, but damn, he wrong for that one, right? Like, as far as that is something that would be actually beneficial for you. And we do that today. That's why we send things in messages of that sort. I mean, not me per se, but I mean, other people. The next morning they sail. They sail toward Tapai. The winds were good. They arrive in Nomuka, whatever they do in Nomuka. And from Nomuka, they go on into Lifuka. They immediately start the whole tapu for the Tuitonga thing, the 8-month tapu. They do all the ceremonies at 2 different mala'es, and I described mala'e before, just a big opening of grass and a big opening for celebrations, kind of like Teufaiva, right? They all show up over there, and they have these celebrations. Plus, they had another ceremony or celebrational ceremony at the cemetery itself, at the Faitoka. The mala'es themselves, one of them was Tuitonga's and one of them was Finau's. Tuitonga's mala'e was near his home. So whether this Tuitonga is a Tuitonga of all of the Tuitongas, of all of Tonga, but as far as we know right now, this Tuitonga was a Tuitonga in Hapai. On Tuitonga's mala'e, they erected 4 columns of yams. And they actually have pictures. People who traveled through Tonga have pictures of these columns of yams built up high and yams stacked inside of those. Basically 4 posts about 4 feet from each other, 4 of them making a square, and then latched on with cross pieces to tie them together to hold them up. And they're dug down about 2, 3, 4 feet. And they were wrapped with fau. Mariner actually says that they're wrapped with fau, which is, I guess, a type of hibiscus from where he's at, or for where he's from. And then the middle was filled up with yams, whether it's ufi or kumala or whatever. It was probably the bigger ones, dalo and kape and ufi. This thing was 18 feet posts up, filled up, and then they added more posts, tied them up and filled them up again, and kept adding them up higher and higher. Mariner said that this thing got up to 50 or 60 feet high. Nothing but yams stacked. 4 of these on Tonga's Malay. And remember, when I say Malay, I mean the opening area, the green area with grass. They're basically their Teufaiva. And on top of these, they put a guaca. It wasn't cooked or anything. It was just put on top of there. And there were 1 of these at each corner of the Malay. 300 or 400 pigs were baked. He says they were half baked or half cooked or cold baked. The following day, all the pigs and stuff were taken to Finau's Malay. 300 or 400 pigs plus a whole bunch of yams. They built out big giant boxes, 4 or 5 of them, and brought it to which held. He said it held about 500 yams, all 5 of these baskets, giant baskets. So everybody from all quarters of Hapai came. Now they're in Hapai at Finau's Malay to watch the celebrations and the ceremonies and whatnot. And some of them got up and started wrestling for the entertainment of the people, right? You know how we get to celebrations and people get up and dance for entertainment? Back then, they got up and wrestled with each other. And they did this in front of the king and his companions, just as entertainment, and they would watch, and they would just sit there, and they were the Finau and his company were dressed in fully plated ngatu, right? The difference between ngatu and tapa back then was the ngatu was the stuff that they painted on that had colors on it, but they actually wore tapa. That's what their clothing was made of, was the tapa. So they sat there and watched it. People started getting up and started wrestling one at a time. A full live WWE type wrestling, I guess, or wrestling of some sort. After everybody shows up, Finau says, "Okay, let's begin the ceremony." By this time, all those giant hogs and giant pigs were laid forward, and the warriors, the young chiefs, the young warriors would get up one at a time and start to carry off the biggest hogs. And if you've been to Tonga, you know how big they get. And they're all laying there half-baked. They get up and they carry one off, one at a time. It sounds like it was more like a pride thing. I'm tough, I'm strong. I'm going to go carry the biggest one and start moving it. One at a time. One of them go and carry the biggest one and move it out of the way. When one of them failed and fell down, another one would come up next. Next man up. Pick it up. Start going. That guy would fall. Third guy would come. Pick it up. These things are humongous. They're giant. If you've been to Tonga, see how big these hogs get. They're one of the giant ones. And this also to the entertainment of the crowd and the chiefs and the kings. Until everybody that wanted to show their strength had taken turns moving this giant pig out of the way. We all know that these things are giant and they're greasy. Mariner, the Palangis were entertained at watching a man pick up this giant greasy half-baked hog to move it just to show strength and show, pride and whatever it is, but it's also entertaining. Eventually, if it was too big, 2 men came and picked it up, moved it away, and a third guy would follow with his liver or with the pork liver. They would move everything one at a time. So just like how we come to a funeral and we bring things and put things down in front of the people who are sitting there, that's basically what they were doing. They were bringing these pigs and putting it down in front of the king and his company. But it was an entertaining thing to watch them move it from where they were bringing it onto the ground in front of the Finau Ulukalala and his company. Mariner and them watched them put it down in front of them, and they also had to move it as well. So they did that, and sometimes they were able to get it up and move it, and sometimes it would be slippery and slip off, and sometimes it would pull the guy down too. And so these are all new things for the Palangi guys to see. So all this is going on at Finau Ulukalala's Malay. Right? They bring and they present, they put down and present. They have this little entertaining thing where they wrestle each other, and now they do the whole pig thing. And then after all that's done, they move it, and they move it on to Tuitonga's Malay, which is about a quarter mile away from Finau's. After they start moving all the food and everything over there, the big baskets of yams and everything, move it over to Tuitonga's Malay. Everybody, the whole company, everybody there gets up, and now they move over to Tuitonga's Malay, where the Tuitonga presides. And when they get there, Finau and his company, the chiefs and them, there's a big circle being made, big ring of people on the Malay, and Finau and them sat on the outside of these people. You would think that they would sit on the inside because they're, you know, the high chiefs and whatnot, but they sat on the outside of the people and amongst them, again, as they knew that it was pleasing to the gods for them to humble themselves down and be the same as everybody else once they are to come and be in the presence of a higher chief. Then they started bringing the big pigs in, but instead of doing it like they did at Finau's Malay, they had two guys lift the big pigs onto one guy, and that one guy would walk over. Mariner said he was tottering, tipping over, and dropping it down in front of Tuitonga now. And it came up to be about 3 long rows of pigs, one coming in at a time. Tuitonga's cooks come out, and Tuitonga's cooks start counting how many pigs they are, and the yams and all of that, start counting them. Finau's cooks go, and they also help too. Remember we talked about how the cooks were the lowest in society, so these are the guys that were in charge of just food. Tuitonga's cooks and also Finau's, and they start counting everything out loud. The number of big hogs, the number of little ones, the number of the smallest pigs, the number of the baskets of yams, right? I kind of imagine how we do it at funerals when people, you know, fafetaye gafu or fafetaye keke or fafetaye, like that's what I imagine in my mind, like they're counting it out loud. Or whatever it is, right? They start doing it out loud. After this is all done, 20 of the largest hogs were taken actually to the burial plot, to the Faitoka. Near the grave is where they put these biggest pigs. One of the giant carts of yams was also taken over there. The rest was all shared out to certain people. One column was allotted to the king, and he was to dispose of it as he pleased. Basically, he's going to share it with whoever he feels like he wants to share it with, which he typically usually shared it with all his fighting men, all his chiefs and all his warriors. He shared his portion with them. Another column was given to Veakai. Veakai is who we kind of talked about earlier, is a high chief almost equal to Tuitonga, but not a Tuitonga, but Veakai. And you don't hear the term Veakai. I don't think I've heard name Veakai anywhere. I've heard Veainu, but I haven't heard of Veakai. But apparently this Veakai chief was one of the higher ones also. One column was given to him. Veakai himself is almost an equal to Tuitonga, but higher than Finau. That's who this Veakai person was. He is also a descendant of a god. So I imagine it's a sibling, maybe of a female sibling. We don't know for sure. He doesn't describe as far as who the Veakai was or what the ranking was specifically. All he says that Veakai is also a descendant of a god, just like Tuitonga, higher than the king. He gets a column. He shares it with 2 or 3 other chiefs. The third column goes to the gods. So usually anything that goes to the gods is taken care of by the priests of wherever they are. Right now they're in Hapai. So the priests will come and they'll take care of that, and they'll share that with their people, their family, and so forth. And the fourth column is claimed by Tuitonga himself, the one sitting there, to share and do with what he pleases. All the giant carts of yams, Tuitonga usually takes also and uses it for his own, whatever he wants to do with it. But typically, whatever group they gave it to, those groups shared it with their families and their people, you know, specifically closest to them and whatnot, their relations, so that everybody had something. All the hogs were done the same way. The biggest ones to Tuitonga, and then Finau, and then the gods, and then other chiefs and other people. So they were sharing everything. And then whatever they got, they shared it with their families and their people. And so it's all given specifically in order to high-ranking members and people. But those high-ranking members and people shared it with everybody they're connected to in relation to family, the servicemen, the warriors, and the chiefs and whatnot. And they did this all the way down, shared it with their family, friends, all the way down till everybody got a piece of yam and pork. Somehow, some way, everybody got some. After all this was done, then they started, everybody engaged in dancing and ceremony and celebration. Obviously, the kawa was there, and they were able to celebrate. And after the celebration, everybody takes their portion home and shares it with everybody. Mariner says that until even the last person got, at the very least, mouthful of pork and yams. From this point on, the tapu that was placed upon the hogs and the fowls and the coconuts, the tapu was lifted after this, and it was made null and void at this point. All the hogs and yams that were left at the cemetery, at the Faitoko, at the grave site, Tuitonga basically shared it out with whoever wanted it. So whoever wanted, they basically came and cut themselves pieces and took themselves yams. Whoever wanted some, they could come, and Tuitonga would allow them to take some for them, for their families. But everybody, every household, every dependent was taken care of. Although it's primarily or specifically for the chiefs to come and share and claim, but because it had been there a few days, they pretty much forfeited their portions to the lower classes for them to go ahead and take and eat. Mariner had no idea why they would leave it there for so long, but he assumed it's probably just a custom to leave the food there for that long. I'm sure nowadays, right? Nowadays we go to a grave site and we just pour some liquor out and give them a portion. But to them, back then, that was their way of pouring it out for the homies, right? Leaving all the food there for the homies. They could have left it there for a little bit and then take it and share it, but they actually left it there for the homies for a few days until it was almost uneatable, to be honest, if it's there for a few days. But then they all took it, and the lower classes came and claimed it, as Tuitonga allowed them. Mariner perhaps thought that it was an offering to the ancients, Tuitonga's ancestors, and it probably would have been sacrilegious to come and claim it while it was still fresh. But that was just the thought that crossed his mind. 5 days later, Finau prepares a wedding for his daughter. Finau has 3 daughters. One of them is about at 18 years old and prepares her wedding to Tuitonga himself. Tuitonga himself was now about 45 years old. So they get the girl, Finau's daughter, 18 years old, marrying this for the 45-year-old. These are all assumed ages because they didn't keep count. They really don't know how old they are. This is just what Mariner himself assumed that they were. She is profusely anointed with coconut oil. We do that still. Scented with sandalwood, and was dressed with the choicest mats and dressings from Ha'amoa. Apparently because of its soft texture and its silkiness of these mats from Samoa. They wrapped these mats around her. Mariner said it was about 40 yards. And it said to the point where her arms were stuck out to the side, right? And he said it kind of looked ridiculous. So she couldn't fully sit down because of what she was wearing. So she kind of leaned down in a leaning fashion on her female attendants that were with her. And they would help her up when she needed to be helped up. A younger girl, about 5 years old, was dressed in the same manner and was given to accompany her as a handmaid. 4 other girls, about 16 years old, were dressed in the same manner to accompany her. The bride herself wore the most, and the other ones weren't as much, but there were still a lot of mats that they were wearing. The 4 16-year-olds and the 5-year-old, all to be companions and handmaids and basically servants. They proceed to walk over to Tuitonga's marae. Tuitonga sitting there with 2 of his chiefs sitting in front of him. They come up and they sit themselves on the grass, or on the green in front of Tuitonga. After a little time, a lady shows up with her face covered with white ngatu, comes into the space. Now she's inside of the circle. This is going to be a new thing that we hear about some of the traditions. The family sitting there, the bride and her 5 companions, Tuitonga sitting there with his 2 chiefs, and they make some kind of a circle with their families, Finau's family as well, and this lady with the white ngatu comes in with her face covered inside of the circle. She walks into the house, up to the upper side of the house, where another woman was sitting waiting. The woman inside sitting there has a large roll of ngatu there, and also a pillow, which is made basically of wood. It's basically a kari, flat piece of wood with wood on there to hold it, and it was about that big, and that's what they used as pillows. She also had a basket filled with bottles of oil there as well. The lady with the white ngatu who walked in from out there came in, wrapped herself in the ngatu, and laid herself down, and she basically pretended to fall asleep. This is a crazy tradition or custom, right, that I've never heard before. I don't know if anybody else has on what's going on so far. Right as soon as she falls asleep, or fake falls asleep, Tuitonga gets up, rises up, and goes over and takes his bride by the hand and walks her in to the house and seats her next to him on the left. 20 hogs were then brought to the malae inside of the circle, and then the cooks were brought out and they start cutting up the hogs. They're using knives and they're cutting them. Now, these knives were obviously traded in by the American ships, but before the knives were even there, they used bamboo. They shaved bamboo off somehow and they used that to cut. But now they have knives here in the early 1800s. And it's a great compliment for somebody to be able to use the knife with that type of skill, for them to come and cut it right, cut it correctly, and cut it nice and smooth and clean. A great part of these pieces of pigs that were cut were passed out to the chiefs, given to them, and they take them and they would basically hold them. Now it says that he put it on their bosom, so came and they would basically put it and they would hold it like this, and because it was tapu, or whatever touches their skin makes it tapu, none of the Tongans could eat it. And so if they were to share that part in this ceremony for some reason, if they were to share this part of the pork or pig or whatever, they would share it with the Fijians that were there, or the Hawaiians that were there, or whoever else that wasn't from Tonga, because it was only upon the Tongans that the tapu was placed upon. It didn't apply to any of the other people outside of Tonga, even the Paalangis. The lady who was laid down, that had the white ngatu in front of her face, who wrapped herself in the ngatu, she, at that point, then she gets up and she leaves. She takes the ngatu with her and the basket of oil. Tuitonga then takes his bride by her left hand, takes her and goes to his dwelling along with the 4 young girls that were with them, her handmaids, her helpers. After this was done, now everybody that was there dispersed to their homes. The ceremony of giving away a wife or your daughter to wife to somebody, that's basically the ceremony. I don't know if it's a ceremony specifically for the Tuitonga, specifically for the king or the chiefs, or if all of Tonga did it, or if it's just hapai. But this was the ceremony that happened. After this, everybody goes home. So within the fencing of a man's home, this time Tuitonga's house or home, within inside of the fencing, there are several houses where the wives stay, and they stay there in their own house, and they only come when they're requested to sleep with him. He doesn't ever go over there. This is basically how the polygamous way of living in Tonga at this time was. You have a fencing, and inside the fencing you had a few houses, and those houses, the wife and their children stayed in those houses. He stayed on his own. Now, Tuitonga stayed on his own. You can't eat, drink, or sleep with him, because then that'll make you tapu, or that'll put a whole bunch of restrictions on you or whoever else is with you. It's just restricted to touch him, eat with him, drink with him. He does everything on his own because of his sacred nature. He leaves her there they take all the mats off, and her usual, right, everyday tapa, basically, she puts that on. She sits there with the other women, right? Probably her mom and aunts and probably cousins and stuff, and they just sit there and they talk. And they're at her house now, and they talk and they entertain themselves and whatnot. While that's happening, the celebration of the food is being prepared for the evening celebration. Everything that you can imagine is there: chickens, pigs, probably all your talos and ufis and whatnots. And he says that kava's there, etc. They get together on Tuitonga's malae and they pass out food to them. This is no different from, I guess, any other wedding today, or perhaps funerals where they come and then people bring stuff to the people who are having the funeral, and then the people having the funeral give them food. But this is basically just a wedding celebration. The food is basically given to them in portions, right? The biggest to the family and the biggest to the other people, and then everybody, all the lower orders and other people that were lower down, were giving a portion, but not as big. Mariner said some of them got such smaller portions, they just grubbed it right there and killed it right there. And where most of them who had the big portions took it home with them after. After this, the kava was drunk, and it was passed out and given to all those who drink kava. Then the musicians, and I say musicians with quotes because they were still in the beating of drums and beating of whatever made noise to create noise, and they would sing, still in a big circle. Everything that happens, whether it's in big groups, are happening in circles, always in big giant circles. in big groups of circles. At this point, they're using bamboos, big bamboos, large bamboos from 3 to 6 feet long, and the guys who were playing them and beating them at different, probably the same tempo or different tempos, anywhere they were making music out of this, or at least sounds to sing to, beats to sing to. So I guess they're the first ones to start making beats and singing to them. Mariner says that they held these bamboos and they would not only beat them on the ground, but they would beat them and hit it too. So they would boom, ding, ding, boom, ding, 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 boom. They had holes in them to make the sound. So depending on the size of the bamboo and where they put the holes and whatnot, they made sound. Either sound from the whistling of the air going in and out of those holes, and they had softwood plugged at the bottom to beat it down, and they would hit it to make these sounds. Something like that. And they had a few of those guys sitting there making music for the celebration. The only other instrument he says that was there was 2 bamboo sticks cut, and he would beat them to keep time, basically. Da, 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 da. Pentameter, right? Tempo. The music was accompanied with dancing. To go get up and dance, and we all know what that looks like, right? If I'm doing this right, I mean, I was born and raised in America, but I know a little something. Oh, what? Yeah. After this was done, one of the matapures came and sat and gave a discourse on chastity, on faithfulness between covenanted people, because this was how they married in this country, right? It wasn't this was official to them. Once 2 people make that covenant, they are officially married. They were advising the young men to respect their neighbors' wives and the women, and to never take liberties, even with an unmarried woman, against her will. Basically, this matapure was teaching about chastity and telling people, respect the women, don't rape them, basically is what he was saying. Don't take it against their will. And gives a whole discourse on how to love and how to behave and how to treat women, how to respect them, how to behave and interact with them. And after the entire discourse was done, everybody rose up and left. They dispersed to their respective homes. The bride, for some reason, wasn't present at this celebration. After this is all done, then Tonga went back to his place. He gets there and he sends for his new wife, in which she comes and accompanies him. After they go into his house, Tonga, now his new wife, which is Finau Ulukalala's daughter, the lights were blown out, the candles were blown out, everything was shut, closed her door. There was a man standing in front of the door of the house who yells out. Mariner said it was like a war whoop, like he chee-hooed 3 times. And after he chee-hooed 3 times, he got the conch shell and he blew that 3 times. So that basically was the confirmation or the end of the marriage, or the completeness of the ceremony, basically. Thankfully, we got through chapter 4. I probably won't edit as much and do those, images and whatnot, but I want to get these things through these chapters a little bit faster, so I'll do less of that until I can actually build. I'm in the process of trying to build a team that can help do this for me, just so we can get through this book a little bit faster and through this story a little bit quicker. But until the next one, I hope you're enjoying this. Tautok Shio. Tuafat.